welcome to another Video Crow Jam, the podcast where two sisters and an occasional guest try to develop and pitch a board game concept in under an hour. I'm Miriam.
I'm Georgia.
And we are very excited to be joined by our first ever guest, our close friend, Alex. Alex, say hi, and would you mind telling the listener a little bit about yourself?
Of course, I'd love to. Hey, I'm Alex. Full name Alexandra, but I prefer being called Alex. I go by she, her pronouns. In my sort of day life, I teach Greek and Latin at university. In my non-day life, let's try and not make that sound sketch as all hell. I like playing games of all kinds, tabletop, board games, video games. When board gaming, I particularly like sort of light strategy type games. So Small World I've been playing quite a bit recently. Not a big fan of Risk, too dice oriented. I like having a little bit more strategy involved in that. I also have mean friends who call me out lots on how high my Civ 6 hour count on Steam is, which is frankly rude of them. But yeah, that's me. And thank you guys so much for inviting me on.
We're really excited to have you and to welcome you to the Crow Jam family. We asked you to bring the prompt this month, which I'm very excited for. So what was the prompt that you decided on?
I did. Well, Halloween is, of course, only a month away. Citation needed. So I figured that a good prompt would be pumpkin.
Yeah. A super cute and excellent prompt. Do you want to start with whether you had any thoughts about how what this makes you think of, or how it might translate to a game?
Well, I think I have come up with a handful of good ideas, or maybe I should say good ideas.
We love it.
Was that the sum total of my preparation for this podcast episode? Who knows? It remains to be seen. So I guess the ideas I had were all sort of vaguely trick or treat related. The first idea I had was a little some sort of street map with little pumpkins in front of all the houses, and maybe it's about space control. Maybe the players have to sort of avoid or go around a certain number of them. That kind of idea.
Okay, love it.
The other sort of vague thought I had was, what about growing the pumpkins? Can you tell I spent a lot of time on Ree's allotment? Maybe. I was vaguely thinking about sort of, would it be some form of different farmers need to grow a bunch of pumpkins in time for Halloween? So yeah, those are the two sort of vague settings I thought of.
Okay.
What springs to mind for you guys?
I would love to follow on from that, because I actually have a market gardening game that involves pumpkins. It's called Three Sisters, and it's a market gardening roll and write.
So the Three Sisters was something that I originally thought of as something that we could think about, because it refers to a sort of agricultural practice of First Nations people, right? Where you grow corn, beans, and pumpkins together because they have a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. So I'm all keen for that, and I actually had an idea that I really want to make a spooky game, but the main idea that I kind of got stuck on was about, the like farmers who grow giant pumpkins.
Sure.
I sort of had this idea about like a point salad style game that's about like just cleaning up at the village fete. So it's not just like trying to have the biggest pumpkin, but it's also you like want to win the hooker duck, and you want to I don't know, win the talent contest, and one of those like point salad style games, whether it be
I like that
roll and write or action selection or what have you. So that's the main one that kind of stuck out for me. But I want to make a spooky game if we possibly can, so I don't want to get too stuck on that. What about you, Georgia?
So I spent a lot of time thinking about what are things that I associate with pumpkins. I thought about pumpkin carving, pumpkin pie. As I previously mentioned, I thought about pumpkin farming, the same as you guys. a lot of things that we've talked about so far have a kind of like Stardew Valley kind of feel to them. So
Sure.
I thought about all of those, and then the idea that I came across that I liked the most out of my own ideas was a game where your character is a pumpkin.
Oh, I
Um,
like it.
I don't think I had much idea beyond that, except that I was kind of thinking like maybe it'd be a fun thing for us to discuss, like what does a pumpkin want? Like,
What does it
what
mean
what is he
ontologically to be a pumpkin?
exactly? And I just feel like these are the questions we could be answering.
And when we say pumpkin, at least in a Halloween context, what we are talking about is a jack-o'-lantern, right?
Yes.
Yes. So,
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, same thing. Um, okay, what does it mean to be a pumpkin?
That was me joking. I didn't want it on the pie chart. Help.
The pumpkin pie chart. Um,
No.
um, okay. Yeah. So, what might, if we were making a game where you're the pumpkin, what might be your goal or
I mean, it definitely doesn't have to be this. Like, Alex had lots of lovely ideas. Your idea about the village fete is great as well. That was the thing that I came up with.
I think if I was a pumpkin, I'd probably want, the usual good career, scare some kids,
Mm.
be
yeah.
terrifying, the usual stuff. And I guess my first instinct is that you are the pumpkin and some form of sort of area control, map-based trick-or-treating game might like work together somewhat.
I
Or they might
was
not. I'm not really sure.
I was wondering if there was some kind of synergy, whether the ideas that both of you guys have brought, whether it would just be funny if it was just a stupid little detail that your farmer character or your village fete character or your trick or treat character is a pumpkin.
yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be anything more than that.
Well, I do want us to try and like have the pumpkin prompt at the core of like our ideas, I guess, which
Mhm.
we have got. I was thinking about area control and maybe this is like trick or treat in a different way. If you had like a haunted house situation and there are different factions within the haunted house. Wait, I don't know if we should start the timer.
Yeah. Do you want me to
Yeah.
start it?
I'll just keep talking and you can make a little beep sound.
Okay, you keep talking and listen for my beep.
um yeah, I was sort of imagining like a haunted house map where
Beep.
there's like different factions that you play as and control areas, and by controlling area you kind of control the paths like within the haunted house and have more chance of like scaring a customer. You know how
Mhm.
in a haunted house it's they like do a lot to sort of maximize the use of the space, so they have the
Yes.
paths that like go back and forth in really tight corners.
So in this idea, are we manipulating the paths or are we manipulating what's around them or both?
I don't actually know. I was just sort of imagining a cool, funky haunted house map because I love that.
I
um,
mean, if each player is a pumpkin in the haunted house, does that work?
mhm. And there's some sort of like I don't know, like maybe a luck based or betrayal dice style thing where like each sort of terrified patron who passes you has a chance to faint, and the more people who faint when they pass by your pumpkin, um, the more points you score.
I mean, if you don't people have people fainting outside your house on Halloween, then frankly, what are you doing? Um,
hmm.
hmm.
So it feels to me like an area control game, which is not a kind of game I play a lot of. So I'll be deferring to your expertise a lot. Is
Mm.
where we're starting to settle,
Mm.
which is sounds a lot of fun to me. And sort of while you guys were talking, I was just making some notes on the slide that there's several different contexts where we could do area control. So Miriam talked about a haunted house. Alex suggested sort of a trick or treat context, so like a town map. Ree suggested the village fate, and then we also talked a bit about like farming and gardening. So I also thought maybe a pumpkin patch.
Oh, okay.
We could either select one of these environments and do an area control game set in just one of those, or perhaps we could try and blend multiples of them. So I was sort of imagining maybe a setting where you have a pumpkin patch outside a haunted house.
Okay. Yeah.
And maybe a porch on the front of the haunted house, like the board has kind of distinct sections where, so then that feeds into Miriam's kind of, I've never heard the expression point salad before, but I think I get the idea.
Yeah, it's like I don't know how many games like this you will have played, but where there's various ways you can win. You'll have got some points from like how many I can only think of somewhat obscure examples.
Go ahead.
I mean, in Wingspan, for example, eggs score points, tucked cards score points. You get points for the birds you have. You get points for bonus objectives, like that style of thing.
Okay. This has also made me think about like maybe the idea of like a pumpkin's journey.
Okay.
So, like you start out in the pumpkin patch where you grow, and then you go through the haunted house where you become scary, and then you get out on the porch, which is maybe where you score points by being scary.
Okay. I mean, wow, this is a hell of a game, but I really love that idea. And there are games that have that kind of like phased structure. There's one, I can't remember the name. There's a tree one which has like the seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and different things happen in each of those seasons. So yeah, I would say that I quite like the idea. I think it would be a relatively snappy game. It wouldn't be like each phase is an odyssey,
Yeah.
An epic of self-discovery by the pumpkin. Yeah,
I don't want it to get too far away from original ideas. This is just a thought I had.
I mean, maybe there's a way of doing.
There could be a way of combining them.
Yeah.
So let's imagine that we've got a game board that has sort of the pumpkin patch, it has the porch, and it has the main haunted house. And let's put like 4 rooms in the house. Let's make it like sort of an actual place. So that gives us sort of 6 spaces total. We could make more. We could divide up the patch more, but you get the idea. It wouldn't have to be done sequentially. So each player, for example, could elect to go, okay, this turn I'm going to be in the patch, and then next turn I could be in the house, and then after that I'll spend 2 turns on the porch and then have 1 turn back in the house. So like it could be that each space you're in gives you certain rewards, either short term or long term, or gives you certain ways of helping to build up something for the next turns, and players can choose different spaces in which to place their pumpkin.
Yeah, this is making a lot of sense to me. I think if we're going to go crazy ambitious, we could even throw the village fate in there, because this is like an action selection game where the patch is kind of the foundation. Like you can't get very much done without growing pumpkins, because pumpkins are the like basis of what's going to happen elsewhere. But maybe the different areas get you different bonuses. Three Sisters is a little bit like this, in the sense that like you trigger additional actions that you can take, and like the main thing that you want to be doing is growing your garden, because that's sort of the main action that you even get access to. But as you do, you trigger like additional actions to let you buy new tools or like water your garden or plant trees that are helpful or what have you. Yeah, this is making sense. Maybe we should yeah, we shouldn't go too deep too fast. So
Sure.
But it feels like there is something here that it's kind of like certainly what I would call a Euro game. I know there's other names for them, but like a bigger box game with sort of where you build little systems to generate resources and rewards, and you sort of try and maximize your score by making good decisions. So kind of like worker placement, but for pumpkins. So
yeah,
I've made a note that says
Sure.
pumpkin placement.
I can almost imagine. I want us to start simple, but I'm just looking at the image you've drawn, Georgia, and I'm just thinking like I can almost imagine there being something where like each separate distinct area has almost a distinct mechanic that you use when you take that action. So like in the patch, maybe you're rolling dice to see like how many pumpkins you can get or how big your pumpkin gets. And in the house, maybe it's like worker placement-y, like if you place pumpkins in certain spaces, you get certain like rewards as you resolve. And then I don't know, maybe on the porch it's more of a like reliable, just like pumpkin to point ratio that you get each turn, or like does that make any sense?
No, it totally does. So I yeah, that's sort of what I was imagining. So like you do see these kind of European resource sort of worker placement type games where it's almost like a bunch of mini games kind of stuck together and you choose which ones you play and when.
It makes perfect sense to me. I guess if we went down this route, my main sort of concern would be trying to make sure the house, well, especially the house and the porch, and to a lesser extent the fet, do some pretty distinct things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want them to sort of blend into each other conceptually too much. I think it's quite easy to make the patch something really distinct, and I really like Bree's idea for that. But trying to find something neatly distinct and also that makes thematic sense and doesn't feel too contrived for the other places is going to be important.
Yeah, definitely agree. Because it would be like the simplest version of it before doing any thought is just like do things, score point, but that's not interesting. Like, I suppose like we might want to consider what additional like resources or kind of feedbacks there might be. Like, for example, and this is a stupid one that wouldn't really make sense, but if you do something elsewhere, maybe you can gain yourself some like fertilizer so that now when you take you next take a pumpkin patch action, you get an additional pumpkin or something,
so that was almost the exact thought that I had, that if you win the tombola at the village fete, then you win a bag of fertilizer, which
my favorite prize.
which improves
beats the homemade sherry any day, frankly.
Your pumpkin yield. So I was sort of imagining to think about the pumpkin patch for a minute. Let's say that this is a game for up to 4 players. I was kind of seeing it as having like 4 rows and maybe you can only take like pumpkins come in at this end and out at the other end. So like normally on your turn you could collect 1, but you could get a power up or something that would let you take 2 at a time, but you need to be doing something to like put them back in at the other end. So like yeah, in a like my ideal version of this, the systems kind of fit together in such a way that you can sort of build an engine that gets you increasing number of pumpkins that then lets you have more out on the porch being scary or getting scarier inside the house through being carved or whatever. Like so that it becomes this kind of, it's not like a straightforward through flow, but I'd like there to be different ways that you could play your strategy. Like maybe you have fewer pumpkins, but you make them really, really scary or whatever.
See, to me, I guess I guess my concept of the patch was just making it a bit simpler, actually.
Mm.
I was more thinking somewhere you just, if you leave the pumpkin there for a certain amount of time, it grows
Oh,
either at a set rate or at a set number of dice rate,
mm.
um,
Mhm.
which then allows you to take it out and do things in the rest of the board for more time.
Okay.
Okay. So size of pumpkin is equivalent to like the number of actions that pumpkin can take before it's exhausted?
Yeah, I guess, question mark. I don't. I guess the question is: do we want the patch to be something fairly straightforward, as essentially a sort of loading bay? That's a terrible analogy. You know what I mean. Words are difficult. Um, or do we want it to actually do something quite cool on its own? Because there's a risk of kind of overloading this with cool mechanics.
I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, one of the hard and fast rules of Crow Jam is that we don't have to have it all figured out by the end of the hour. It's good to have like a few solid ideas. I
I
quite
have
like
to say that I'm George's explaining of it is I've got a better picture in my head of how that like translates to the rest of the game.
Honestly,
see, interestingly,
I agree, and that's coming from the person who actually said the other explanation of it. So
but
yeah, that sounds good to me.
I still like what Alex is talking about in the idea that there's something you could do where you say take one of your pumpkins out of circulation
Mm.
and it becomes more powerful if you leave it, if you know what I
Ooh,
mean.
yes, okay.
So maybe that's like maybe that's what the porch is about. You know,
Okay.
that's a place where you put your pumpkins where maybe so to think about the porch for a second, you could maybe have like the porch could have a number of slots
Mm.
where pumpkins can go. And then they're worth increasing numbers of points the more of them you fill, but you only score those at the end of the game or something
Sure.
like that.
Because they're scarier. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, you only score that on Halloween. That also makes sense.
And I would definitely give a house way more scary points if they had like 6 pumpkins in the window versus just one.
Yeah. I just
Okay.
like this. Yeah. This is a competitive game. I was about to be like, is this cooperative? But no, this is a competitive game.
Have
Like,
you met a jack-o'-lantern? Nah, this is competitive.
yeah, she's so right, and she should say it.
Okay, yes.
So I feel like we have a sense of two of the areas. So the patch is starts out as like a very simple, like as long as you have pumpkins in there, you can take one per turn, but you can gain cards, upgrades, something that lets you take more than one per turn if you complete certain things on the other boards.
Uh-huh.
And the porch is somewhere where you can put your best pumpkins. So maybe pumpkins gain tokens by going through some process either in the house or at the fete. And the more you have out on the porch, the more bonus points you get. Maybe there's even like a multiplier.
This makes a lot of sense to me. A pumpkin could, for example, gain more tokens by being carved prettily
Yes.
in the house, and that makes it a highest point scorer on the porch.
I feel like the fate is probably where the carving would take place, right? Like there would be Georgia and I will be very familiar with the like vegetable animal competition. Yes. that's the analog that I'm going for. Like at the village fate, pumpkins get turned into scary pumpkins.
Sounds good to me.
And I guess there needs to be some sort of mechanical process that's happening there. Like,
so my immediate thought was that would it be good if it was like a push your luck mechanic where like there is the risk that you'll overcarve your pumpkin and it'll turn into mush.
I love that. Yeah, that's a very strong idea. It would be
yes, that absolutely is. I love it.
Like a dice based thing, maybe like a like if you you can continue rolling. If you roll the same thing twice, then your pumpkin's dead, or like
Or
potentially
worse, it's
like
soggy and has a sad face.
roll a certain number of dice, but if you get a certain number of the bad symbol, then pumpkin annihilation has occurred.
Okay, yeah. So on a turn, you might take one pumpkin from your supply, do something to reseed your supply if you think you're running low, and then place a pumpkin into the village fete to try and do the push your luck thing, and maybe move your best pumpkin onto the porch.
Yeah. I guess I still feel like we've gone a direction of having quite a one-way system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, but maybe the house is the solution to that by having multiple different areas. But then maybe the fate could have multiple different areas as well. Maybe there is like a tombola or something there, like, you know, a deck of upgrade cards or something where there's also bad outcomes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the tombola could have, the like the sort of power-ups that you're looking for, but also have bad ones.
Exactly. The tombola's a good like way for us to like randomize and put a load of random shit in, which is also what tombolas in fact do in real life. So that suits us.
I think that's I like that because it adds more different ways of playing. And this is a good example of like a mechanic that we don't have to figure out on the podcast, but
Sure.
Like you could make it so that these upgrade cards had impact on the way you wanted to play. Maybe it made you loads better at growing pumpkins, or maybe it gave you like an extra chance at the push your luck game or something, so that you started to specialize in one way or another.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay.
I like a lot.
We've got, so I'm imagining a kind of action selection situation. I don't know how many actions you get on your turn, but I feel like, maybe you always get a certain number of pumpkins out of your patch per turn, but an action choice is like reseeding, or an action choice is like going to an area of the fate, or
so you're doing more than one thing on your turn, but you couldn't do everything on your turn. Like,
agreed. Yeah.
Would it be done? I've never played a game with one of these, because anytime I see one, I assume the game's not for me. Is this where a rondel would be useful?
Oh, what?
You know what? I feel like,
Miriam, could you explain what a rondel is?
I've never played a game with one either, except I think that Three Sisters actually might have one. It is, it's like because it's a roll and write, you roll dice for everybody at the beginning of the turn, and then the dice are put into groups by what number they are, and then they're placed sequentially around this rondel, which has actions. Like, so each space is a different action, and if you choose that die, you take that action.
Okay, so that is, I think a rondel means that you have to take certain actions, like you move around in a particular direction, but I quite like that as a potential idea as well.
Yeah.
But I also like people just maybe having just three choices and they just use those however they want.
I currently don't see any reason not to go for a player just has X number of actions. And
yeah.
You're right.
I guess let's see how the house pans out.
Yeah.
If the house is complete chaos, which is secretly what I want, but we'll pass over that for a moment.
No, I think we've already made like such a sort of like at least visually complex and
down
like
with rondels. Sorry, carry on.
A like action selection-y point salad-y game. Like, I see no reason why we shouldn't add a bunch of extra wrinkles in the house. Like, it could be that we have a haunted house, but the haunted house still has kind of like ordinary house functions. Like there could be a kitchen in the house where pumpkins get turned into pumpkin pie, for example.
Oh, that'd be really good,
Yes,
especially if you could
lovely.
then do something with them
With the pumpkin pie could go to the fete and get judged.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're moving on to thinking about the house, which I really wanted to do because I had some possible thoughts, but I'm fine with these not being used. Which is that like so far everything we've done is pretty like within reason, but it's kind of like based in a reality, right? Like these are all things that could actually happen to pumpkins. And I was just wondering if there was a room with like real Draculas and ghosts and werewolves and stuff. I don't know why. Like I don't know
And
what
that
their
was
role
very
would
much
be.
my intention behind the house, so I hope so.
Yeah, I think so too. Like we've made an extremely pumpkin centric game, and I think this reality definitely can be spooky as we choose.
Yeah, like I want the pumpkins to be able to get possessed.
Yes, yes. So in the kitchen, pumpkins can become pie. In the dining hall, pumpkins can get possessed and spook the heck out of people. Does spooking
but
people
with some
provide
but
some?
with some like chaos option. Like if it gets possessed, I'd want like some chance that it, I don't know, explodes and you lose the pumpkin. But
Yeah.
also some chance that it then becomes, I don't know, scary and therefore has extra mechanics.
Or like
Yeah.
a sentient pumpkin that just kind of like does things automatically on your turns. So like without taking up your actions, it just goes ahead and does something that a pumpkin does.
So like that's lovely. I was thinking actually the other idea where if it gets possessed, it could be have its actions determined by dice roll.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I.e.,
so it like randomizes one of your.
it can now go to the fate or go to the porch randomly, but it's no longer in the player's control.
Oh my God, that would be so good. So that you still get your three actions, but you get another one sort of at random, I suppose. So
Yeah.
it's likely to benefit you, but it might not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my thinking, which I don't like as much, is that you could just draw a card from a possession deck and then your pumpkin gets powered up in some way.
I guess my issue with that is that it might get, like, it probably wouldn't, but it might get too similar to the Tombola.
Yeah, I know, I completely agree. I'm much.
And I suppose you also have the situation where it might be tricky to keep track of which pumpkins have which thing. Whereas if it's just possessed or not possessed, we can just have double-sided tokens where like pumpkin is orange if normal and black if possessed.
Mm.
So you kind of you end up with like an automated pumpkin, but I guess maybe the dice you roll, because there's four, well, at the moment there's six or maybe seven places it could be, but you could make it so that there was like some bad outcomes on the dice so that it was kind of like push your luck again.
Mm-hmm.
So the pumpkin might act in your favor, or it might, as Alex suggested, explode.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if it gets possessed a second time, it's just like that pumpkin's out of action.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. You've tried to put too many ghosts inside that pumpkin.
And yes. So that works nicely because the dice could just bring it back to the dining hall where it gets possessed again.
Yeah.
And if the dice brings it back there, then yeah, the pumpkin explodes. Like then that delightful pumpkin grenade that George has drawn for us. One thing though, I'm not feeling the dining hall as a place where things get possessed. Do we have it? Can we work on that a bit?
Yeah. Totally open to anything for that.
I mean, my first thought was the wine cellar because it gets possessed by spirits.
Yes, there we go.
That's just me like moving heaven and earth to get a good pun in the game somewhere.
She's got it. She's got it in one.
Yeah, I mean, I was also thinking cellar, but just because cellar equals spooky. I'd not even reached the pun potential. Okay, so yeah, I want to count areas because we've got the fate with carving, tombola, potentially some kind of pumpkins contest or pumpkin pie contest. That's three things. We've got the pumpkin patch, which is kind of like a very foundational to the game. We've got the porch, and we've currently got two areas in the house. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 distinct areas.
Also, yeah, I was thinking the same, and I wonder if your pumpkin gets possessed, maybe it has to stay inside the house. Because it's like bound to the place where it died, the ghost is.
Okay, sure.
So then
Or
it just
maybe, or
yeah.
maybe it has to stay there for like n number of turns after the possession.
Yeah, I guess I have a question about that because I'm picturing pumpkins kind of moving all over the place and like what sort of mechanically happens when things do different things. Like for example, when a pumpkin is made into pie, is it then sort of exhausted when like the sort of payoff for the pie happens, or does that pumpkin stick around?
To
And
me, pumpkin becoming pie means you get a certain flat number of points from it.
Yeah, I would see that as like sacrifice for points.
So
yeah,
like it's a solid outcome. It's not a a like particularly lucrative outcome, but it's solidly like giving you a return on your pumpkin investment.
It's also an example of something that could be a really lucrative outcome if when you played the tombola, you got a card that's like champion pie maker. Pies are worth triple points.
True.
It's kind of incredible the extent to which we're sort of making Three Sisters. Yeah, and like for example, with carving pumpkins at the fete, they can have different levels of scariness, and how are we going to represent that on the pumpkin? Like, do they get little markers on them, or
Yeah, I was imagining little tokens that you put on them. Maybe even something that like clipped or slotted in.
yeah,
Like if the tokens were sort of on the bigger side, and we're imagining them double-sided, maybe they
Pumpkin,
could
not to scale. Sure, carry on.
yeah, they could have like I don't know, like sockets
yeah, I'm
where
definitely
you like
imagining, yeah.
socket stuff in.
Oh, I
I
mean,
was going for the much lower tech approach of either a fairly large pumpkin token where you can put stuff on top, or the pumpkin token is pretty small and gets stacked on top of things.
Oh, so you maybe just get more of them, or yeah.
So like
Yeah.
Yeah,
you
maybe
can
it's
have them as
almost the
they could all
opposite
be
of
like colored discs, and you know one black disc for how scarily it's carved. I'm running out of ideas already.
No, I feel like there is something to think about here, which is that if the pumpkin tokens are all small and identical, then you can get, yeah, like rather than socketing things into the pumpkin, you socket the pumpkin into things or put it on top of things so that a pumpkin can be scary and haunted or scary or a pie. Or it can
I'm
be
loving
a
this idea
scary
of
haunted
I'm
pie.
loving this idea of the pumpkin being possessed, but not scary at
Yeah,
all.
it's possessed by a friendly ghost. Yeah, so that you can just do something to indicate the pumpkin. It's like got a status effect. So do we want to think about some other rooms in the house? Because I think that Alex has just very neatly kind of solved the token problem.
Yeah. Okay, different rooms in a house. The Okay, we could have like the living room as kind of like a cinema, like a home cinema, right? Like there's a spooky film or some kind of like media experience.
Pumpkins, the biopic. Got it.
And can we think of something that we might get out of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
So what are some outcomes that we might want for, like, what are some ways that we would want to generate points? Like, we've sort of talked about this a little bit. Like, is it going to be better to like try and level up one pumpkin really well, or do we balance that with making it so you have like lots of pumpkins that aren't very leveled up? Like,
it seems like most of our points are coming out at the moment are coming out of either the kitchen or the porch where pumpkins are being scary.
yes, I agree.
And the fet and the patch currently are ways to power up your pumpkin,
yes,
rather than
Yeah.
things that actually award the points for the pumpkin.
There could, I mean, if we had an additional thing within the fate, which is like a contest for pie. Oh wait, no, that's the kitchen, right?
Yeah, the kitchen just gets you a flat number of points. That's where we have sort of landed on it at the moment. Because also with the stuff that happens in the house, we would want you to have a decent opportunity for good things to happen to your pumpkin if it got possessed in there.
Yes.
Good point.
So is it like, I don't know. So there's no system by which your pumpkins get tired. You don't have to rest your pumpkins.
Pumpkin bedtime. That's so cute.
Okay, well now I feel like we need pumpkin bedtime, where you go to bed and dream about pumpkins.
Following the game mechanics, isn't the pumpkin the one going to bed?
Yeah, the pumpkin goes to bed and dreams about pumpkins.
Yeah, no, sensible.
Um,
And what precisely does it gain from this?
My immediate thought is like something that you could like carry forward, or something. So like you get a better go on your next turn, but that's not necessarily that interesting.
What if so in our I'm wondering, I was gonna say like, so some games will, if they're like dice based, will give you a power up or like an expendable thing that lets you change a number on a die, right? But we're not actually using dice that much unless they're somehow involved in the patch.
Yeah, well, or maybe we add something to the house. We talked about at the start of what we were doing, we talked about sort of different areas having different kind of mechanics. We've done a push your luck thing. We've done a like draw from a deck thing. We've done a randomized dice thing with the possession. What are some other types of thing?
I mean, there's the kind of like early bird gets the worm type system. Like, you know, you have like a stack of things that you can take as an action, and the top thing is just worth more than the things underneath.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know what that would correspond to, but
no, this is giving me something, because just thinking about Alex's idea before about how we might like stack our tokens to indicate things, it seems to me that you could have with any of the status effects, whether it's the pumpkin being carved or the pumpkin or any of the other things, you could have a pumpkin, say in the push your luck mechanic we talked about before, you could have your pumpkin be carved +1 and you put it on a small disc, but then if you push your luck again it gets carved +2, giving you like a +3 pumpkin, but obviously you've taken a bigger risk. So you put it on a medium-sized disc, and then maybe there's also a +3, if you see what I mean, so that you can like really level up a pumpkin real good. but maybe there's a version of this where you can also take the best thing first, so they get used up over time. So if you're the first one to go to bed, you get the +3 rested token.
I'm kind of thinking there could be another way of looking at this. Like, it's a bed. There could be a person in it. What if the pumpkin goes in and scares them?
So you get, like points for having been scary.
In which case, you'd want to say, like, points for how scary it is are determined by how big it is, whether it's possessed, and also any other mechanics that might be in the pile you've picked up at the tombola.
Yeah.
That's a good way for us to, like, given in the house, like, if we've already got kitchen, which is a solid, like, X number of points per pumpkin, no questions asked, we also want something in the house where it's more variable as a way of producing points.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, if the pumpkin goes to the bedroom, you roll a dice for how many points you get, and then add on, say, 2 if it's possessed and more for its size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the like obviously the number, like, I haven't thought through the exact numbers here, but I'm just like, that's the rough mechanic I can see it working by.
I totally like that. And I would propose a little tag on, which is that maybe you could add a little bit something for the replayability, is maybe like, or for different people visiting it, maybe the person who's sleeping in the bed has like different fears. So
they're terrified of pie.
I was just about to say terrified of pie. So that maybe there's a stack on there. So the first time you go there, you take the points for being the first one to go there, and then the second time you go there, you have to be haunted to get the points, or something like that. So that you can add a little bit more.
I love that. That's like the person in that bed is growing increasingly hardened.
yeah, they're getting less and less.
haunting.
That was what I was thinking as well, in terms of your idea, where you get more points by being the first person to do something, is that the person in the bed starts out being really scared, like, whoa, a pumpkin. But then by the end, they're like, ho hum. Like,
is this pumpkin even a pie?
I like that a lot. I quite like the idea of diminishing returns to it. You'd want to have some mechanic that stops it from being like the ideal outcome to like rush a pumpkin there immediately.
Yeah. So maybe you have to, like, that my suggestion might fix that, right? Like, maybe you make it so that you have to have +1 or be haunted or something before you go there. Like, you have to achieve something first.
Okay,
that works. You could also have it like, have there always be like a 1 in 6 chance that the person in the bed doesn't wake up.
So have a dice roll as well.
Yeah. So like, if there's always a chance the first person to go to that room, to the bedroom, doesn't actually manage to wake the person up at all, which means that the first to scare is still up for grabs.
Yeah, I really like that.
This is making me think. I'm not sure which way I want to take this, because I was imagining the porch being sort of a scariness matters zone, but we could either have 2 different places where scaring matters, which I think is like totally fine.
It is Halloween, but go on.
Or it could be more like the porch is sort of like the retirement zone, like either you've got a lot of pumpkins and so you're going for scoring points by like just getting some of your pumpkins in the porch anyway, because like you can't have more than 1 in a certain space, or like it's towards the end of the game and you can't necessarily gain more points, or like it's going to be more beneficial for you to put pumpkins in your porch because it's got that like level up according to how many pumpkins there are there. Is what I'm saying making any sense? Because
it does make sense.
Sound good to me.
It's made me flip back to the slide where I sort of doodled the porch. So when I initially doodled it, it was kind of like, it's got this number of slots and you don't get any bonus points for putting 1 pumpkin there. You then get +1 for your second pumpkin, +2 for your third, and so on. I was just wondering if, to make scariness matter, you turned those into like multipliers, so that you wanted to try and get your scariest pumpkin on the space with the highest multiplier.
Ooh, that's good.
So then creating a little bit more of a push your luck thing, because obviously, like, if you take too many risks with your pumpkin, you run the risk of it like, you know, getting destroyed in one way or another, getting made into a pie, or getting haunted.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when your pumpkin is haunted as well, there's a chance of it going to the porch, with the porch still being part of the house. But then you obviously, you don't have control over when it goes there. Like, there's the possibility that you'll get its points kind of for free, on top of the points you get from your 3 moves, but also, like, it could block a better pumpkin or something like that.
Yes. Interesting. Man, I love when we make crazy games. What's our timing at?
Oh yeah, we've got like 17 minutes left. We've gone all in a little bit, but I mean, I feel like we pretty much have the core of the game. Like, we obviously don't have all the details completely figured out. We don't have.
I agree. To me, the main like mechanical thing that's missing is sort of deciding how many pumpkins can there be in each place, and things like turn order, things like what stops every player from putting all their pumpkins in the most beneficial spot all of the time, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
agree.
a thing I'd want to work on. Doesn't have to be now, but that's the main thing missing for me.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to think about some of these, if let's say for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and then get on to, because I don't think we're going to have to spend too much on visual identity.
No.
So questions that I would want to answer include, Alex already mentioned, turn order. How do you win? Or, like, how do we know when game is over?
Yeah.
I would want to know, how do you prevent sort of, I don't know how to put it, like, unfair play?
Or just people zeroing in on a single optimal strategy.
Yeah, I've got an input on that, and actually I think this,
Although
it would make things, like, add one more piece of complexity to this very complex game, we could go back to the rondel idea and have the rondel be a thing where you roll a die, move that number of spaces around the rondel, and like choose like one of 3 actions. So like the space you land on, you do that action, or you do the one to the left or the one to the right. Because
I've
then
accidentally messed up the
we also have the option to have the thing I was talking about before, where like a power up could involve have like being able to flexibly change what number you've rolled on a die. Is that making sense in terms of like that people can't just choose to only ever do one action because they are limited by chance?
Yeah, so I think I think that makes sense. So, like, if you have, so let's say you have 3 moves per turn, you could determine those by placing your 3 tokens onto a thing that represents 3 different actions, and then on your next turn you have to move them.
Okay.
Or something like that.
Okay.
Or I don't know, like, I was slightly distracted by messing up the video recording while you were talking, Miz. So sorry if I just said something completely stupid.
No, that's okay. Like, yes, I just think that like if we have some sort of visual thing that like limits action selection, like doesn't take away choice, but just means that you don't have absolutely free choice.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that works.
In terms of turn order, we could do a simple like round the table. Oh, you mean turn order in terms of like what do you do? Like on your turn, like what happens first and then what happens next?
Yeah, that's more what I was thinking. But I think that can be, you can either have it where that's, you can do three actions and you can do them in any order, or we could like give every action a number. Um, and you have to play them in numerical order so that you're always, so pumpkin patch is always the lowest one, so you always do that first, and porch is always last, or something like that.
Yeah.
Alex, any thoughts?
I think I like that second one more. It sort of makes sense to me to have like, I don't know, growth phase first, but give it a nicer name than I have. Um, to me, yeah, to me, sort of resolve patch, then resolve fet and house in some order, then resolve porch makes the most sense. With the proviso that a given pumpkin can move between house and fet, I think, is the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
I think each pumpkin can maybe only move once per turn. Like maybe you can't do like you can't have one pumpkin go to the fit and then the house and then the porch, if that makes sense.
How many active pumpkins can each player have at a time?
So
Good
I think
question.
I think that's totally up to the player. That's what I was imagining, is that you could, depending on various things in how your game goes, such as cards you get from the tombola, you could end up with lots of pumpkins, but only be able to move three of them.
Yeah.
So then you've kind of got like potentially wasted pumpkins. Or you could have
Sure.
only one or two pumpkins, but you're trying to like maximize them.
Yeah, they're somehow possessed and pie and well carved and all of these things. Sure.
So actions only resolve if that's the for a pumpkin if that's the pumpkin that you've moved. Like the thing only happens when you move it to that new space.
Yeah, things happen on moving into the space, not on like being in the space.
But then
Unless
perhaps they're left there and there's like only a given number of like worker spaces where a pumpkin can go in each space. And so like
so if you leave pumpkins there, you're potentially blocking it for other people.
Yeah.
I quite like
That's
that.
why I think turn order matters.
Sure,
Is
yeah.
there a risk that the player going forth is like literally always going to be scrambling for pumpkin slots because they're behind? Maybe not. Maybe. It was my concern.
Yeah. I mean, we could have a decent number of pumpkin slots in each space so that like no one you're not going to be cut out on first turn, and therefore as long as you can get into that space turn one, like
Yeah, that's fair.
The other thing to maybe think about would be to have the thing I hate the most, a points tracker, because there are some points scored along the way.
Yeah.
Where whoever's in last place gets to move first.
Oh yeah. Just a nice little simple catch-up mechanic. Yeah.
I was also going to suggest like maybe one given player per round can forfeit a single action to go first in the next round.
Okay.
Yeah. Or we could just
that could be what our last room is. Like there are plenty of games that have that. Like you select this action and it does nothing except next turn you're the first player.
Okay, yeah, that'd be absolutely great. So basically it gets you the first player. That just has one pumpkin slot.
Yep.
It gets you the first player token. Is that pumpkin then destroyed so that there's always
No, I think it just takes an action to put it there.
It's just that then are you
I see.
blocking someone else from doing it next turn kind of thing. Maybe that pumpkin just goes back to the patch.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left. So I don't think we need to do like a really big recap of the game, but I think we can do a little bit of like chat through sort of what we roughly came up with, and then we'll think about what we're going to call it and what it's going to look like.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems that we have a sort of action selection point salad game about pumpkins and all the ways that pumpkins can wreak havoc. You need to grow pumpkins in the patch, and then you'll be selecting actions to move them to various areas where they can either be leveled up or sort of do something that will resolve in a certain number of points, like either as you play or at the end of the game.
Yeah, so we're not going to go into too many of the details of it, but it's a sort of, you've got a variety of different ways of interacting with the game board, a variety, hopefully, of different strategies for scoring points. It's all based around making things with your pumpkin, whether it's making your pumpkin scary, making it haunted, making it pie.
You're asking the crucial question of what if resource management, but there is only one resource and also it's scary.
There is only one resource, and it is pumpkin. So yeah, we haven't got like every single detail ironed out, but that's not unusual for games that we design that are on the more complicated side. So yeah, it's time for us to think about what we might call this thing.
I feel like the name should not involve the word pumpkin, maybe only purely because I think we've said the word pumpkin about 300 times.
Control F pumpkin in the rule book, it'll just be off the charts. Your computer will crash. Can we riff off jack-o'-lantern somehow?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point.
What about Jack of all trades?
Oh, it's good.
Jack o' all trades.
Yeah, Jack o' all trades.
I like it.
And maybe that's like written like it's somebody's name. It's like Jack O. dot all trades, all one word.
Stylized as.
I'm not convinced by it being someone's name, but I do like Jack o' all trades. Okay. I mean, I'm pretty happy with that as an identity. What does it look like? What's the look and feel?
So to me, the game is a sort of, there's a game board with a sort of essentially, I instinctively visualize it as a map from above, but maybe the interior of the house wouldn't work so well that way.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a slightly fudged sort of like isometric type view where like, yeah, you've got the cross section of the house, and you can see the patch.
It absolutely could just be a map from above, a la Cluedo.
Yes, yeah, that's right. That's completely true.
We don't need the rooms to be on a separate floor.
No, that's just very much what you think of when you think of a haunted house, because it's got to be like teetering and
they need staircases, goddammit.
So, I mean, in terms of colors, I'm seeing lots of sort of your Halloween colors: brown, gray, orange, green, purple. Although stuff to do with being haunted to me kind of glows blue.
To me, the house is quite purple.
Sure.
Yeah, and I agree.
To me, outside is orange, but in a more autumnal way. I mean, makes sense.
Yes.
And also the fetes should probably be pretty brightly coloured. Like there are going to be little tents.
Yes. It's nice to have this, it's all kind of brought together with a slightly spooky feel. Like I was imagining a village fete like the kind I'm used to, but you could totally do a version of that that's like haunted feeling. Like, yeah, little tents and stuff.
I actually really like Alex's idea of the different parts, like because it's a game that's got all these distinct little areas, each of those having their own kind of color. So the pumpkin patch, obviously, like brown and orange, shades of brown and orange make sense there. Within the house, you could have shades of purple, maybe, some teal, but you're kind of cool bluish colors. And then, yeah, the fate may be sort of some greens and some brighter colors. I think that's really
and I'm very much imagining not necessarily like 3D, but the feel is sort of like Nightmare Before Christmas style, like scary cartoony. Like
yeah.
it's
Sure. Yeah, I
I,
can get on board with that.
I actually quite like the idea of going quite in on the Nightmare Before Christmas thing, and maybe even having a kind of claymation sense to it, something with a real sort of Tim Burton sense. I can feel that.
I mean, I'm just that's just very sort of synonymous with Halloween for me.
Totally. Okay, so with sort of 2 minutes to go, today we designed a sort of point salad action selection Euro game with a strong Halloween theme. We were inspired by Alex's prompt of pumpkin. The game we've made has a sort of top-down Cluedo-esque design, but with sort of color-coded sections. It's scary and cartoony in a kind of Nightmare Before Christmas style, and it is called Jack O' All Trades.
So good.
Yeah, I feel like we had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
better ingredients than a pumpkin in a point salad? I love it.
Thank you so much for coming and joining in with us, Alex.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Where can the listener find you online should they wish?
The listener can find me on my Twitter account, which is the creatively named at Alex Hardwick 95, where I talk about generally like academia / quiz and other general knowledge chaos, and just things to take my fancy. Don't expect cohesion, but expect quite a few cat memes.
Yes. And the listener, if they're listening to this like maybe 2-3 days after release, should go check out the blog, because I will probably have released my best attempt at a more complete description of how this game would work and what it would look like. And they should go and listen to our previous episode, Astro versus Cosmo, because that game just truly blew us away with the directions that it went in and seemed very good. With all that said, I know that Alex has to get to her next engagement, so be sure to come back next time for more Crow Jam. Cha-cha!